Hi everyone, it's Danny. Alrighty, so today we're gonna discuss about orchid name pronunciation, Latin versus English. Now, I recently saw a video from Holy City Orchids in which she presents the latest issue of the American Orchid Society magazine, and one of the articles specifies how to pronounce different orchid names in English, and that's really cool, especially for me. Now, I know many of you guys have complimented me on how I pronounce orchid names. Thank you, but you really don't have to because I have no idea what I'm doing. And I'll tell you why. Now, intuitively, I kind of know how to pronounce orchid names in Latin because my native language is a Latin-based language. And also, I did 1 year of Latin class in school, but I don't remember much. I only remember a few rules. So I kind of know that OE and AE is usually read as E. So I kind of know a few rules, but not too many. My biggest problem is how to transform these names from Latin to English, because I am not so intuitive in English, obviously. But I thought I should make a video on how I would actually pronounce the orchid names, the most popular orchid names, or funny names, into my own language, into a sort of a Latinish kind of way, because sometimes it's really funny. Sometimes they absolutely do not sound like English names. So you have an idea of the troubles that I go through with my pronunciation. Alrighty, let us start with the famous Phalaenopsis orchid. Now in English, many people pronounce it as Phalaenopsis or Phalaenopsis. I'm not really sure. Into my own language, however, I would pronounce it as Phalaenopsis. So when I try to pronounce names, I make a combination between Latin and English in a way, and whatever sounds good to me is good to go, but I have really no idea if it's the correct way of pronunciation. Okay, another one that is pronounced slightly different is Cattleya. In my own language, it would be Cattleya, not Cattleya. But I'm not really sure how to pronounce it in English. I think Cattleya sounds good, so that's how I would pronounce it. Alrighty, another funny one is Oncidium. Now, because in my language the C and I are actually a different sound, I don't have any C's in Oncidium. In my own language, it would be Oncidium. This goes for Cymbidium as well, Cymbidium. So you see, that's a little bit of a difference, but these are usual ones. Okay, let's take a look at some funny ones. Alrighty, the Encyclia cordillera. Why do I pronounce it Encyclia and not Encyclia? Because you have an Y here. Well, in my language, the Y is usually read as an I. So that's why I pronounce it Encyclia. Furthermore, into my own language, this name would actually sound quite different. It would not sound like Encyclia, it sounds like Enchiclia. And the cordillera sounds like cordillera. So you see, the accent is slightly different. I did hear various ways of pronouncing this name, like Encyclia cordillera or Encyclia cordillera. I'm not sure. I just pronounce it cordillera because I heard Mr. Fisher pronounce it as cordillera, so that's how I'm pronouncing it. But the funny thing is, if you pronounce this name in German, it would be Encyclia cordillera. Hopefully I didn't sound like Dracula there. But anyway, this is how you would pronounce it. So actually, in the end, the way you pronounce orchid names really has to do with your own native language. So if you have different accents, you would most probably pronounce it differently. If your language is not Latin, it would definitely not sound like a Latin name because of your language. So that makes me think that it really doesn't matter so much the accent you place. Maybe it just matters that you have a general idea about the orchid, so you don't go to your orchid society and say something that everybody wonders what the heck you just said. But I don't think you should worry so much about how you pronounce certain names or the accent you have, because your native language will have a toll. If it's not a Latin language, you'll most probably have trouble deciphering Latin and how to pronounce it. Alrighty, let's take a look at a few others. The Rhincostylus celestis. Again, I would read the I or Y as an I. So it's not Rhincostylus for me, it's Rhincostylus. Rhincostylus, sorry. There you go. I have trouble as well. Celestis. Now the OE in Latin is read as E as far as I can remember, so this would be read as Celestis. But because in my own language the CE is not C, it's not an S sound, it's something else, I would read this as Rhincostylis celestis. And I think I actually know why the name. This orchid is blue. Celeste has something to do with the sky in Latin, so that's why the name Celestis, because it is a blue orchid. Okay, here's a funny one. You know that some orchids have a double I in the end, and sometimes you would call them as Parisiae in this example. Well, in Latin, you don't really do that, so I would read this name as Parisi. I don't know which is correct. Maybe Parisiae is correct, but for me, because I tried to make a combination between Latin and English to try to make it sound good, it would be Dendrobium parisi, not Parisiae. But there you go, this is how they can actually differ in name. Same goes for the Lodigessi. Now with Lodigessi I have a different problem because in German, I only heard it pronounced in German. In German it's Lodigessi. I'm not sure in English how it would be. In my own language it would be Lodigessi. Now here's an absolutely funny one. This doesn't even sound like the same orchid. So you know the Phalaenopsis violacea. In Latin this would be pronounced violacea. So you see, it's quite different. The same goes for purpurea. It would be purpurea, or I don't know. I don't have another example, but this is how you would read this name, certainly not violacea. So if you refer to this orchid in different languages, it can actually sound like a totally different orchid. This is actually the one that is the funniest. Whenever I talk about this one with my friends, I remember how I would call it in English, now I actually call it in Latin, and I'm like, wow, it really does not sound like the same orchid. Another one that sounds completely different is the apple blossom. Now, because in my language, the W is not actually a W, it's a double V for some reason. Whenever we see W, we actually read it as a V. So this name in English would be Iwanagara, but in my own language, it's Ivanagara. So it really depends who named this orchid. If the person who named it was a Latin speaker, let's say, maybe it's Ivanagara. But if the person who named it is an English native speaker, most probably he intended this name to sound like Iwanagara. So you really don't know because you might pronounce this totally different depending on your native language. So I'm really not sure how to actually pronounce this name in English. And then there are those orchids who have such complicated names that it's not really intuitive in Latin either. For example, the Salagine orchid. I've only heard it pronounced in English, so that's why I call it Salagine, and I know it's correct. But in Latin, I don't even know how it would sound like based on how it's spelled. Celogine, maybe something like that, but it sounds horrible, so I cannot pronounce something like that. And another orchid that I really don't like to pronounce is the Nelly Eiler. The name in English would sound something like Boragera, but it sounds silly to me, so I just don't pronounce it because I feel awkward pronouncing it. I cringe at the name of this orchid, so I just pronounce it Nelly Eiler. So in the end, you know what? If you cannot really pronounce correctly the names, don't worry about it because most probably there aren't many people who actually know how to pronounce these names. And also, if the name is meant to be in Latin and pronounced like Latin is pronounced and you're not a native Latin speaker, most probably you'll get it wrong, and that's that. But it's not really wrong because your language has different rules and different accents and intonations. I don't even know if that was a word, and so on. So I wouldn't really stress about it. It's always nice to know how to pronounce things, but if you simply cannot pronounce, it's not intuitive for you, don't really worry about it. We all have trouble, especially me. I always, when I see the name of an orchid, I kind of know how to read it in Latin or into my own language, and then I think about how would this name sound in English? Is it correct? Is it not correct? And so on. So I'm doing my best for the sake of education, but I totally get them wrong sometimes, and that's that. So yeah, really don't worry about it. But I might do something on Orchid Nature. I might try to, well, I'm gonna do a different section on Orchid Nature, an ID section for orchids, which I will start these days. I'm starting to drift away from the subject, but it has a connection. So I intend to do like sheets for every hybrid or species in which I tell you about it. It's a sort of an ID page, but a sort of complicated ID page in the sense that I do tell you where it's from, how it looks like, how it smells, and so on, but I also show you leaves, roots, and stuff like that, and also the specifics. I don't know, I want to do something very complete, not in the sense of the orchid wheeze, because that's a lot of knowledge there and I don't have that knowledge, but you know, something very more than basic, let's say, so you know if something is normal with your orchid or not, or its pattern of growth and all of that. I know as a beginner I used to look for these sheets everywhere and I could not find them, or if I did find them, it would cost more than I can afford. The Orchid Wiz still costs more than I can afford, and that's that. Maybe one day I'll buy it, but I decided to do something free with the orchids that I have, or the orchids that I can find available and I can grow, so maybe this will be useful for a lot of people to describe in a lot of detail a particular hybrid or a species and so on. Of course, the sheets will have videos as well. I will have care sheets and so on. I will try to dedicate more time to Orchid Nature, so that's the thing I'm working on right now together with my boyfriend. So I was thinking that for each like species and stuff to add the correct way, or the way I think it should be read, but I'm trying to find the correct way of reading orchid names for the ones that I know. So yeah, maybe that will be helpful. But for the main part, I really don't mind when I hear people mispronouncing names, because I might mispronounce them as well. It might not seem that way, but I do have trouble sometimes with pronouncing stuff in English which are not intuitive for me. So sorry about that, and yeah. Alrighty, so I hope you found this video funny to know how I would pronounce stuff in Latin. Again, if you cannot pronounce orchid names, don't worry. Latin is a horrible language if you don't have the intuition for it, if your native language is something totally different, so don't worry. Okay, before I let you go, I would just like to give a shout out to my viewer Jeanette, because she asked me to, and yeah, I like to do shout outs. So hi Jeanette, thank you so much for being my viewer and watching and commenting, and yeah, I hope you like my videos further on. So if you have suggestions for videos, this is valid for all of you guys, just leave me a comment with your suggestion. Okay, thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to see more videos from me, don't forget to subscribe. You can leave me comments, suggestions, and questions in the comment section below. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram. Visit orchidnature.com for more orchid information to come soon. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. I'll see you next time. Bye!